What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today we're back with another instance of the System Crafters live stream series. And yeah, we're gonna get started in just a moment. Let me get my screen pulled up here. All right, so if anybody's here in the chat today, please say hello. I want to say hi to Eric and Lord Devi, TRDV, Firelights. Let's let some more people file in here. Mark Owen, Defragged. Let's see if I have any trouble with my new green screen setup here. I think everything's good so far. Juanito, Osloy. Hey, Steve. Nice to see you, Steven. Rune, Kashav, Dean, Peter, Garjola, Tomas, Appenzel, Pavel, Alex. Nice to see you all here today. Dominic, K. See some new people here today. Hey, David. All right. I'm so happy it's Friday again. We're gonna go into the weekend now with style, using you know, our normal System Crafters live Emacs chat. I always love doing these because it's fun to just, you know, hang out with all the community and talk about whatever comes to our mind as far as Emacs is concerned, and also show some other cool stuff in Emacs. Also, hello to Experimentales Zug, maybe Andreas B. Matis, maybe that's how you pronounce your name. Fondrak, Alex, Tomas, Akshit, Almost Random. A lot of people from Discord here. Thanks a lot for joining today. All right. Well, today, what I thought I would do is to continue on with a new thing that I started last week, since it seemed to go over pretty well. People were pretty excited about it. Dominic, the answer to your question is I'm going to do a video on Monday, maybe Monday or Wednesday, about how to install Geeks as a package manager. We're not going to do a full system install yet on that, but we'll do that soon. So yeah, I want to do another instance of this new thing I started called Dotfile Detective. So today we are going to look at the configuration of tecosaur. I think tecosaur may be here today, or at least he was planning to be here today. But basically, if you've spent any time on the Emacs subreddit on Reddit, you've probably seen tecosaur's configuration on a couple posts that he's made over time about it, and also people tend to share it around because it's pretty interesting. Hey, tecosaur, nice to see you here. It's an interesting configuration because it's made on Doom Emacs, which we haven't really shown anything about Doom Emacs on this channel yet, so it actually will be pretty cool to see a Doom Emacs config, or a highly customized Doom Emacs config. And also, he's done a really nice job of making a website out of it, so we'll take a look at that too. But first, let's just get into the configuration itself. I tried to set this up for myself to be able to run it and show you the configuration this morning. I had some issues with it, but maybe we'll try to diagnose them live and see if I can get it working. Mainly it's because I'm not installing it as my main Emacs config, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to run this stream, but I'm trying to do it in a different folder. I could use something like Chemex or Chemex, or however you want to pronounce that, but I'm just trying to do it the old-fashioned way, just trying to set environment variables. Doom Emacs apparently provides a way to run a configuration from another folder, but it's not working for me, so maybe we'll figure it out whenever we start looking into that. But I tried to make a valiant effort this time to run the config, so maybe we'll be successful. We'll see. All right, so let's jump into the folder for this. I'll go into my detective folder. Tecosaur says, my config makes a lot of assumptions that work well for me. Yeah, I think that's basically what everybody does. I don't think anybody would be able to run my configuration directly, so don't worry about that. All right, so the basic folder setup here is that tecosaur has a literate configuration. It's all driven from, I can't speak this morning. Driven from this config.org file. There's also a README that gives some basic information about how you can install it, which I did try to follow these instructions, and at least for the purpose of getting tecosaur's configuration generated into the folder that I cloned it into, it worked fine, but Doom is giving me a little bit of trouble. And then, let's see, these EL files are all being generated from the config.org. So Experimentalis says that Zug is just stuff, or Zig. I don't know. I'm bad with German pronunciation. I'm bad with about any pronunciation, but I try. So let's look at the config.org file. Now, one thing that you're going to notice here that you probably don't see in a lot of literate configurations in org mode is there's a lot of stuff in the header area of this file. And that's because tecosaur is using this file directly to generate the HTML output for his configuration website. So you'll see things that are pretty obvious, like, the author and the title, but there's also subtitle, which is being used in the HTML export backend. Some other macros, the date that the document is being updated, which seems like there's a lot of macro or function like stuff in here to get like the git revision, modification time, date and time, basically a lot of information basically about when this file was updated last and then turned into an HTML file. Also some stuff about the HTML head. These are some things that will get sent to the HTML export backend, like also this part here, the begin export HTML. I think we're basically getting a raw HTML block that gets put out into the output. So a lot of interesting stuff to take a look at here if you do want to try to directly generate an HTML file from your config whenever you export it. I don't think it's actually exported here right now. No. Yeah, so probably you have to run a script for that. I wonder what the setup that SH script is. Okay, so there's a lot of actual system setup stuff here, it looks like. Building some things. I didn't run this, so maybe things won't work if I try to use the configuration. We will have to see. Tecosaur says about a dozen other files too. I think last count my config tangled 15 different files. Yeah, that's where it goes whenever you start using org mode. You start tangling everything. Tomas says that he started using Emacs 2 about 2 weeks ago and it works flawlessly. I definitely need to try that because I have a lot of trouble trying to run multiple configurations at the same time. So I think I'll give that a shot later today probably. All right, so back to config.org. So let's just take a look at the overall structure of this file. I also want to point out that there's a few different places where tecosaur uses quotes inside of his configuration, which I think is pretty cool because whenever we actually look at the HTML output, you'll see why these things are here because it makes a very nice presentation. Tecosaur says also with generating with dynamic content based on the system state. Yeah, that's another really powerful thing about using org mode for your configuration because you can actually change the output that gets tangled out based on variables in Emacs or system configuration, etc. I use that in my config also, and it's very, very useful. So there's some general information about why using Emacs and some sort of commentary on using Emacs, which I think is very interesting to read because I agree with a lot of what tecosaur says here. Basically, once you start getting into heavy Emacs customization and use, you start to understand a lot more about why Emacs is unique and important in its own way, and tecosaur is giving his basically his favorite features and basically his perspective around using Emacs. Also, some interesting comparisons between different editors, especially in terms of his rankings on extensibility, ecosystem, ease of use, comfort, completion, performance. I haven't really seen a configuration that goes this far into detail on sort of explaining their perspective on other editors as well. So it's almost like a blog post / configuration all at the same time, which I think is pretty awesome. Some information about which things you might need to have installed, which is pretty cool. Also, I think he's mentioning some issues that there are in his configuration. Excuse me. But I think these are kind of minor in the scope of things because I think what he accomplishes with his configuration is pretty massive in comparison to just these couple of issues that bother him in the config. All right, so rudimentary config basically is just like the sort of common everyday configuration you would need for Emacs. I'll start getting into more depth on what's in here. So looks like he's using auth sources or authinfo.gpg for storing secrets, which is good. User full name, email address, typical stuff. Let's see, what else? Simple settings. Delete by moving to trash. Yes, everybody, you should set this to true, because otherwise you might lose stuff once you start deleting things with DIRED and other things in Emacs. Window combination resize. Take new window space from all other windows. Now, I don't know about that one. What's that? Excuse me. I think I'm going to have trouble with my voice today. Hopefully not. So if T, resize window combinations proportionally. If this variable is nil, splitting a window gets the entire screen space for displaying the new window. If it's T, splitting a window tries to get the space proportionally from all windows in the same combination. That's not very useful documentation. Allow splitting a window that is otherwise too small. Okay, so maybe what this means is that Emacs will stop you from splitting a window if it thinks that it doesn't have enough space to do it. But in this case, maybe turning this on allows it to actually continue to split if it's too small, just because of whatever the logic this uses. There's also a value that lets you set a limit, it seems. Let's show the variable for that. Oh, there's a lot of stuff here that you can use, it seems. Hugo, if you're referring to that documentation string, I agree. All right, so X stretch cursor. Stretch cursor to the glyph width. That actually sounds interesting because, as you can see, my mouse cursor is pretty small. Non-nil means draw block cursor as wide as the glyph under it. Okay, interesting. That means the actual text cursor. Block cursor is over a tab. It will be drawn as wide as that tab on the display. What? Okay. So basically it's saying it will stretch the cursor to be as wide as whatever character it's on, which is kind of interesting because, as it says, if it's on a tab character and the tab character is wider than normal characters, then the cursor will stretch to fill the whole place, which might be useful as a visual indication of what character is at the cursor at any given moment. So that could be useful, but it's not something that I've ever used before. Undo limit, just extending that quite a lot more than what it probably is to start with. What's the default on that? Yeah, way smaller. So if you want to have a lot of undo, maybe you can set your undo limit to be very large, like tecosaur did here. Evil want fine undo. Now that's interesting. I haven't seen that one before either. See, this is what's great about going through this. I learn about a ton of new variables that I haven't seen before just within the first 5 minutes of looking at things. So I think I know what this one is about. Excuse me. With evil, usually whenever you start typing, my perception, hey Simon, my perception is that when you start typing and then you press U to undo, it undoes all the way back to the point when you change from normal state to insert state. So it sounds like this one is more granular about the amount of text that gets typed and then can be undone with the undo command. So there are two possible choices. Nil, no means that all changes are made during insert state. Matthew Tecosaur mentions your name inside of his configuration, so probably he has seen yours before. Let's see. Means that all changes made during insert state, including a possible delete after a change operation, are collected in a single undo step. Yes means that undo steps are determined according to Emacs heuristics. So basically, Emacs has its own way to determine what size a block would be for undoing changes. And if you set this to T, I think it will use Emacs heuristics and not the Vim style heuristics. So that's interesting. I might try to use that in the future. Autosave default. Let's see. Tecosaur says that he shamelessly steals what he likes the look of. I mean, that's the whole point, right? We share our configurations so people can learn things from them. Let's see. Autosave default means do autosaving of every file visiting buffer. Yeah, that usually happens anyway if you turn on autosave mode, I think. Let's just check on that. Let's see. I'm going to use... Yele asks, what's the license of this? Let's see. Let me check license file. This is MIT license. So let's check. What was it I was going to look at? Oh. Yeah, so truncate string ellipsis. Yeah, that's useful sometimes, I think. Display time mode. So Tecosaur wants to see the time on the mode line, which is usually pretty cool. One thing I don't like about putting things like this on the mode line, though, is I find that they don't update quite as frequently as you would expect. Like, for instance, if you have your battery status on the mode line, if you don't move your cursor in the buffer for a while, it actually won't update those things automatically, or at least in the past I've seen that happen. So maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe Doom mode line helps to update it a little bit more frequently, but excuse me. I'm not sure about that. Kashav asked a good question. I thought Emacs configs have to be GPL. Well, I mean, nobody's going to force you to make a GPL, but I guess technically speaking, you're loading code into an editor where all the rest of the code is GPL. I think that it doesn't actually matter though, because like for instance with GCC is GPL, but if you compile a program with GCC, it doesn't actually make your program require to be GPL. So I think it's the same thing with Emacs, where basically if you're loading in code into the environment, they don't really have control over what license you use for your environment. Now, if your code is supposed to go into Emacs itself, or if it's supposed to go into the GNU ELPA package repository, then definitely I think it should be GPL. But I don't think that you have to have it be GPL. Tecosaur says they don't unless you include Emacs code in the config itself. Yeah, that makes sense. MIT is GPL compatible. Let's see. Lord Devi says this kind of question is why GPL is ultimately a POS license and makes hobbyists have to become lawyers. Well, you do have to think a little bit more about how you use your code. So yeah, I actually did set my dot files to GPL, and I kind of regret it now, which I probably will just change it. So password cache expiry. Yeah, some of this stuff is not super interesting, so we'll just keep moving. Global subword mode though is actually kind of interesting. Let's check that out. I don't know about this one, but I can kind of guess what it is. All right, so subword mode. Great job explaining what subword mode is. See subword mode for more information on subword mode. Okay, let's check the command documentation. Picked the wrong one. Okay, so subword movement. Come on, explain what it does. There we go. Enabling it changes the definition of a word. So if you saw the video I did on Monday about word-based movement, or I guess efficient movement in Emacs key bindings, I think this changes how the forward and backward word functions or commands work. Changes the definition of a word so that word-based commands stop inside symbols with mixed uppercase and lowercase letters. So basically, if you have a symbol like GTK widget, where there's two subwords that have capitalized first letters, it treats those as individual words. So forward word and backward word would move between those instead of having it treated as a one contiguous word. So that could definitely be useful if you do a lot of programming, but it's definitely not the default. Let's see. Elephant454 says you can set a variable for setting the update rate of the time in the mode line. Can't remember what it's called. Well, that's cool. Let's see. Display time update. Let me put a caret in front of this. Default load average. Yeah, it doesn't actually have something here, but Pavel asks, I'm curious, what's your concern with GPL? Well, at least for me, the reason why I say I regret making mine GPL is because people would have to worry about taking some piece of my configuration and then wonder if they have to make their config GPL. I would definitely like it if someone would be able to just take stuff from my config and not have to think too much about it. So that's why I'm going to change it back to something else. I mean, WTFPL is a good sort of permissive license, which basically just says do whatever you want, but I'd prefer to have a license that doesn't have a curse word in it. Not because I have a problem with curse words, but just, you know, I don't really want that in my repo. But yeah, probably MIT or BSD2 or something I would change it to. Let's see. Let's get out of this one then. Frame sizing. Basically setting the default frame size. That's pretty typical. And yeah, typical stuff. Auto customizations. Okay, so basically setting the custom file location. A lot of people ask me sometimes with the Emacs from Scratch series, whenever I set up my configuration and I use package and set one of the custom variable sections, it actually puts those variables inside of my init.el file at the end. This is basically how you avoid doing that. You just have to set your custom file variable to move that list of custom variables into some other file, because by default it tries to put them into your init.el file. And this also, this one little tiny check to see if that file exists and then load it at startup. So that's definitely useful. Windows. So let's see. Tecosaur finds it handy to be asked which buffer they want to see after splitting the window. So interesting. What do these variables do? I haven't seen these. Evil split window below. So if non-nil split windows are created below, oh, maybe this basically just toggles the splitting directions. So by default, evil split buffer splits it. I guess this is a vertical split, or this, see, that's the thing is like, if you ask anyone what is a vertical split and what's a horizontal split, you're probably going to get a different answer. For me, I guess you would say this is a horizontal split because it's a horizontal line. It makes two horizontal buffers. And then if you do evil, was it? No, what is it? Split. Window V split. Yeah, it does a vertical line split basically. So I think what these variables are doing that Tecosaur has set is basically reversing the direction of those, which is interesting. Probably there's a good reason to do that. Hold on. I got to fix my window size now. Yeah, I can't drag that easily, so. There we go. Okay, what else do I see here in the chat? Matthew says, should I change to a less permissive one? No, I think that's great. I mean, more permissive is good when it comes to configurations, because unless you've written some kind of code in there that you feel like is like proprietary or patentable, which, I mean, who's really doing that in their config anyway? It's better to have it be permissive so that people can come and take things from it, because that's the whole point of putting your config online. I'm sure any of you who have put your configuration in a GitHub repository or a GitLab repository, whatever, to share it with people, that's the whole point, is that so that people can come look at it and maybe take pieces, because at least for people like us who are using Emacs, there's no way for a person to know everything about configuring Emacs. I mean, I've made, what, like 60, 70 videos on Emacs at this point, and I still don't know a lot of these variables that I'm seeing right now inside of this configuration. So being able to go and look at other people's configs and take things from there is very important, I think. I mean, it's not necessarily required to copy the stuff verbatim every time, because a lot of times you can just look at it and be like, oh, okay, I see that variable, I'm gonna go write that myself in my config. But still, I mean, I think it's good to just have a permissive license. So WTFPL is great. MIT GPL, probably some Creative Commons stuff would all be good for that. Lord Devi says, I've seen some people kill the custom file entirely. Yeah, I put mine in the temp folder because I don't want to check it in. Now, there's one reason why sending your custom file to temp or to dev null is annoying. If you go to any buffer that has file or directory buffer local variables set, and it prompts you to say, do you want to save these variables as safe for the future? The way that it saves those is it puts them in your custom file. So if you put your custom file somewhere random where the file might get deleted, then the next time you start up your Emacs session, it's going to prompt you again for those things. So that's like the only downside I can see really for that. So one thing I might do instead is set my custom file to something in my .files repo, but just ignore that file from Git so I don't check it in. That way, for this computer, anything I've set there will be persisted across multiple sessions. However, the other downside of that is that if something causes a custom variable to be set, it might cause your configuration to act differently across multiple machines, because some random variable got changed somewhere and you don't know because you're not looking at your custom file, but there's a variable being set there. So there are multiple ways to look at it. Personally, I've gone with the approach to just put it in the temp folder so that it gets cleaned up every now and then. Eric says he uses the Don't Be a Jerk license for 99% of his stuff. So I haven't seen that one before, but that sounds like another pretty permissive license. All right, so let's see. What else we got here? Ivy buffer preview, yep. So this may be the first point where we've seen something that actually comes out of Doom Emacs. So in Doom Emacs, you'll see a lot of these functions that have exclamation points. I think they're just basically custom versions of certain things for the way that Doom does its config. So this is an advice around prompt for buffer, which causes the window splitting. Oh, no. Basically, whenever you run either of the window splitting functions, it will prompt for buffer after you call it so that it will switch to a different buffer. So that's basically what's happening here. Elephant says, I save my custom file and then don't load it. Things can write to it, but it won't change Emacs behavior. That's not a bad idea, actually, especially if you're using the custom config section of your use package blocks. That way, you're basically setting all the important custom variables yourself anyway, so that might work fine. Garjola says, using GPL for a config does not forbid from taking anything from it. GPL from distributing further without these sources, which is impossible for a config. You might be right about that. I'm not sure about the minor details. So basically what Garjola is saying is that if you take 5 lines from a GPL-based config file, it's not really a violation of the GPL, which might be true. I mean, I guess the idea with GPL is like the whole program source, or at least, you know, significant parts of the program source should be treated as GPL licensed, and then it causes effects to your source. But I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to come after you for taking pieces of their GPL-based config unless they're insane. So I think it's fairly safe to assume that you can take someone's GPL config. I hereby give anyone who's watching this right now permission to copy things from my GPL-based config until I change it to something else. tecosaur says that the def advice exclamation point function basically defines a function and then sets it up as advice all at the same time. Pavel says, I don't think you can take lines from GPL and license the program as MIT. Yeah, it might be the case. Those are very subtle distinctions when it comes to using licenses, and definitely, if you're worried about copying code from someone's config, consult your lawyer, because we're not lawyers. Elephant says, I've got lawyers on standby. Try me. Yeah, let's not go copy anything from Elephant's configuration. So let's see. Window rotation is nice and can be found under space WR. So this is probably Doom Emacs built-in configuration, unless it's what tecosaur sets. No, it doesn't seem like it. So yeah, that's one thing I don't know about Doom Emacs, since I haven't really used it that much, really much at all. Probably looked at it one time and then stopped. I don't know what the default key bindings are, so it seems like there are window key bindings under space W, and the R and capital R keys will, under that prefix, will rotate your window configurations, which is interesting to have. Let's see, what else? Space rotates layout. So these are all the evil window map, and I'm guessing that's probably the Control W binding, which I also use quite a lot, adding some extra bindings there. So basically like Control W left, down, up, right for moving to those windows in those directions. And then also moving the window configurations. It looks like possibly Doom Emacs has its own function called +evil/window move left, which allows you to move windows, or move the buffer of one window or the window configuration of one window to the left or to the right or up, down, etc. We had another video on the channel, I forgot what it's called, but we basically talked about other ways to do this if you want to do something inside of your default or your vanilla Emacs configuration, I guess you could say. Buffer defaults, this part's commented out right now. I think that what tecosaur is trying to do here is set the default mode to org mode instead of fundamental mode. But apparently it causes issues with mixed pitch and Hydra, so that's interesting. Okay, so Doom config. So now there's some specific stuff here for the Doom configuration. And I'm seeing here some no-web blocks, it seems. So it looks like he's pulling pieces of his config from other places inside of this file, which is cool. We'll check those out in a second. Let's see, what else? So this is interesting. There is a heading on this block for, or a property on this block for attribute HTML collapsed T. So it sounds like in the output HTML file, this may actually not show up by default, or if at all, which is kind of cool. If you're exporting your config to HTML and you want certain parts of it not to be visible by default, you could do this collapsed T maybe to make it not show up. I mean, this particular section here is not very interesting to, oh, is it custom attribute? That's awesome. We'll take a look at that then. This part is not super interesting to people. However, it is kind of core to the way this config works. So probably people would need to see it, but it's a little bit noisy maybe by default. So let's check out if we can find where this collapsed is. Let's see. Here we are. So HTML export. There's a whole section here basically that talks about HTML export. and apparently he's got a lot of custom config for how things get exported. And this is basically where the description of this custom attribute is. So he's defining his own variable org HTML export collapsed, and then adding a new collapsed entry to the, was it org export backend options, maybe? Yep. And then default properties export collapsed. Interesting. Okay, so this is getting picked up somewhere else here probably. Yeah, we're not going to go too far in depth on this because that's a little out of scope for the general description of the config. So let's go back to that later. So there's a few things that are being done here. So it looks like he's configuring not only just the typical config, also term config, checkers. I'm guessing that's like fly check and stuff. OS level configuration, language configs, email configs, applications, etc. So we can check out a lot of those different things. Hi, board student. So let's see, structure, nicer defaults along with the bindings and smart parens behavior. Okay, so basically turning on the functions for the literate mode, I suppose. Okay, so here's another section where we will see, okay, so here's Doom completion, all right? So this is the no-web blocks that we saw referenced before. So there's Doom completion here, there's Doom UI. Both of these are Emacs list blocks. And these are just lists of symbols and maybe nested lists that are known to Doom Emacs for the purpose of configuration. So basically you're turning on Doom Emacs configuration sections basically, or features in Doom. It's a very similar thing that also is done in Spacemacs, if you ever used Spacemacs before. So it seems that you can have just the name of a symbol that refers to a feature in Doom, and then there's also sub-lists where you can have like a plus something to add another like sub-feature of that feature, I guess, like emoji plus Unicode. I'm sort of making some assumptions here based on what I see, but I'm guessing it's probably correct. And a lot of description here about what they all are and why he's using them, which is good. Doom editor configurations. Is there anything interesting in here? So he's using ligatures, which is cool. I don't actually use ligatures very much, but I can see why people would use them because they look nice, especially if you're using something like Haskell. Peter says, I see a nice tofu box next to the emoji config. What is that? Oh, yeah, that should be a tofu box, but obviously I don't have my emojis set up right. That's because the Unicode fonts package is not working well for me with Emacs Native Comp. Let's see, Treemax, blah, 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 blah. So we're using evil everywhere. Okay, Tecosaur says that most of these descriptions come from Doom itself. Multiple cursors. Some things have been turned off, like Lispy and Parinfer, which makes sense because they're kind of hard to get used to. So it's kind of like a thing you have to make a concerted effort to turn those on and try to suffer through using them at first. DRED setup. VC mode setup, makes sense. And then it looks like he only uses vterm at the moment. There's other term configurations here, but they're not turned on currently, which makes sense because vterm is pretty good as a good standard everyday terminal. Let's see, Doom checkers turns on, so that's interesting. So there's some checks here to see whether an executable is found, like a spell, and if it is found, it will turn on the spell feature. So maybe that's part of the default suggestions for Doom configuration, or maybe it's something that Tecosaur set up. All right, so for tools, we have some Ansible and Docker. Looks like this person is doing some development with virtual machines and containers. LSP mode. Some other things that are not turned on here, like gist. Terraform, okay. Improve the Emacs terminal experience. Now that's interesting. I haven't actually looked at what Doom does for this, but I don't really use Emacs in the terminal enough. However, I wonder if that actually has some nice things that might be useful for using Emacs in Termux on the phone, because that's the only place where I have to use Emacs in the terminal usually. Language support. A lot of languages not turned on here, which is probably good in case, you know, if you're not using them, there's no reason to load those packages. So we have Emacs Lisp, Emacs Speaks Statistics, which makes sense because there's a lot of statistics-style graphs that Tecosaur has in his output file. You'll see in a minute. Some Julia, so some more mathematics related stuff or data science related stuff. LaTeX, a lot of org mode related things. Jupyter, yep. Tecosaur says that Doom's term TTY does stuff like turn Xterm only features on with more terminals. That's interesting. Yes, Steven says ESS for the win. Steven's one of the maintainers of ESS, so I'm sure he's happy to see that. All right, so Python, LSP, Pyrite. Okay, so basically using the Pyrite language server, which, yeah, probably a good idea because the sort of default one is extremely slow. Nice to see someone using Scheme. I wonder what Scheme you're using. Is it Guile, maybe? Let's see. And there's some general shell stuff. Okay. Oh, and also, one thing I did notice is that Tecosaur has an implementation of Emacs everything. I don't know if this is the one that's being used here, but I would guess so if it's in your own configuration. So for those of you who haven't heard of it before, I haven't really used it, but I've heard other people talk about it. So Emacs everything. If you just search for that on Google, or let's not say Google, let's say DuckDuckGo, because that's what I just used. Where? So it doesn't show up by default? Is it everywhere? Is that what it is? Everywhere. So that's my bad for using the wrong word. Everywhere. Okay, so wait, no. Okay, so apparently there's a few different implementations of this, it seems. And this is not the one that I know of, so let's see what Tecosaur says. Yeah, everywhere. Guile for Geeks. Okay, good. Another Geeks user around, which always makes me happy. Okay, I'm just going to look for Tecosaur's repo. So anyway, the idea here is that this makes it easier to use Emacs as an editor for basically anything in another program, in theory. So if you're editing something in a program, you should be able to pop over to Emacs to do the editing for you for that text buffer. I also see that Henrik, the creator of Doom Emacs, has contributed here. So obviously this is the one that's being used in Doom Emacs. Also, Elkin here, who is a member of the System Corruptors Discord, has contributed to that. So that's cool to see. All right, so let's go on to the next stuff here. So font settings. This is always an interesting section for people to see. Looks like for the normal monospace fonts, Tecosaur is using JetBrains Mono, which is also what I'm using. You can see that font basically here in this section. I'm using that right now. For the variable pitch font, he's using Overpass, which I've not heard of. What font is that? Overpass font. Is that in Geeks? Let's see if the REPL will start up. Come on. Let's go. OBS really just slows this whole machine to a crawl. Okay, Overpass. Nope, not in Geeks. I should turn my, what you call it, keycast on. There we go. Overpass font. Let's check this out really quick. So it's sponsored by Red Hat. Okay, that's a kind of interesting looking font. That could look pretty cool, I think, inside of the Emacs experience. So that's something worth trying. What does it have a license? Because that's something that would be pretty easy for someone to contribute to Geeks if you wanted to see that in Geeks. Because I think fonts are fairly easy to submit patches for. Peter says, if I recall, Overpass font is used on US highway signs. Is that real? Let's see if I can pull that back up again. I mean, it doesn't say that here, but it could be. I mean, it sort of looks familiar, but maybe, maybe Peter's pulling my leg. I don't know. All right, so let's see what else here. So there's a Julia Mono font for Unicode. It's cool that Doom has its own setting for Unicode, because that's one thing that's a little bit of a pain in Emacs, is setting up Unicode fonts correctly. There's a whole like font table thing in Emacs that you have to tweak a little bit to make things work correctly. So it looks like Doom does the work for you, which is kind of nice. Serif font. Now that's interesting that there is a distinction here. I'm guessing that maybe in certain circumstances Doom will use a serif font rather than a sans serif font. And Tecosaur is using IBM Plex Mono for that, which is kind of interesting. Uh-oh. I think maybe we're having some internet issues at the moment, so let me know if you see any buffering in the video. All right, let's see. What else? Required fonts. Now, that's interesting. Is this something that comes with Emacs? A variable without a source file. It looks like it's something maybe Tecosaur is using in his config. All right, so available fonts, missing fonts. Okay, so it looks like there is a... Peter says, on the homepage it says it's based on the Highway Gothic, which according to Wikipedia, developed by the United States Federal Highway Administration and used for road signage in the Americas. Okay, that's cool. So, run at time, deferring this function. Map concat propertize. Huh. So basically you're just trying to check to see if the fonts are available using some interesting approach with propertize somehow. That's interesting. Yeah, you're going to get errors anyway when you start Emacs if the font isn't there. So maybe this is a better way to catch it early without having to just get yelled at the whole time. Okay, so Doom 1 is nice and all, but I find the Vibrant variant nicer. So apparently there's a way... Oh, okay, it's just another theme, basically, that you can use that is more vibrant than the default Doom theme. So it sounds like he's using basically the default, or a variation on the default Doom theme, which is quite nice. By default, red text is using the mode lines and make it orange instead. Yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. Conditional buffer encoding. Okay, that's a little bit beyond the scope of my brain at the moment, so I'll skip that. Relative line numbers, that's interesting to see, but I guess it makes sense if you're using evil key bindings. It's better to have relative line numbers so you can do prefixes on motions to jump like 10 lines forward, etc. However, for me, I wonder if it's better to do that or to have something like Avi, where you can jump to specific lines or specific words or characters even, using other key bindings. So that's interesting possibilities there on the level of granularity you can get to using either something built in or maybe something that's external package. Fallback buffer name, dashboard name, helper macros. So this looks like just documentation. So load for loading external EL files, use package for configuring packages. Yeah, obviously. Adding load paths, map for binding new keys. I've seen this map a lot. Tecosaur says line numbers and Avi. Why not both? Yeah, well, that's true. You could use both for sure. You don't have to use one or the other. Map for binding new keys. It's kind of a nice syntax that Doom has for setting new key bindings, I think. Allow Babel execution and CLI actions. What is that? Generate code to include my config. Works nicely, but for it to work, I need to make sure that org doesn't try to confirm. Oh, okay. Yeah. Basically setting org Babel evaluate inside of CLI.el. Okay, so basically it's a special file that Doom uses whenever you're running the Doom commands on the command line to configure Emacs for the command line operation. So that's kind of nice. That's a cool little feature, I think. Doom uses command line commands to do like syncing of the config, etc. So it makes sense for this to be a thing for Doom. Mouse buttons. Let's see, how far are we along here? I don't want to go take too much time just looking at every little thing. Tecosaur, if there's anything like specific in the config that you think would be cool to look at, definitely feel free to call it out and I can go look at that too. So here's an example of that map function I was talking about. Basically, you can use map exclamation in Doom to easily map something to a command. And in this case, I don't know what :n means, but you're giving it the key for mouse 8 and mouse 9. So I don't know if that means you have a mouse that has 8 and 9 buttons, but you do have some extra buttons that you're using for moving, jumping back and forward inside of files, which makes sense. Okay, great, thanks. So the :n means to bind this in evil normal mode, which does make sense. So probably there's :I and :v for the other Vim states, or editing states, modal states. Window title. So we're customizing the frame title format using just a buffer name and not anything else, which is kind of cool. Looks like there's some cool characters being used in there. Customizing the splash screen. I think he uses a different logo for the splash screen, or the dashboard, I guess you could call it. Okay, so :NVI works to make combinations of those states. That's cool. So what else we have in here? Template colors being configured. A lot of customization on the splash screen here. But, you know, if you're using Doom Emacs and you have that nice splash screen that happens whenever you start up, it makes sense to want to customize that at some point too. For me, I just drop right into eShell whenever I start Emacs. tecosaur says that he's getting about a 30-second delay. Yeah, I think I'm having some internet issues at the moment that are preventing me from streaming smoothly, so I apologize for that. My Google Wi-Fi, mesh Wi-Fi network has been giving me trouble lately, so if that tells you anything. All right. Dashboard phrase. Okay, let's skip through some of this. That's a nice little stylized Emacs ASCII banner. Okay, so systemd. Okay, so basically configuring a systemd daemon for running Emacs as a daemon, or daemon, whatever you want to call it. Let's see. An Emacs client wrapper. Yeah, if you put me on 2x speed, I think that my speaking might be too fast to understand sometimes. All right, let's see. So he's got a wrapper for Emacs client that does some extra things, which is kind of interesting. But I don't think I'm in the state of mind to be able to make sense of any bash script at the moment, so I won't be able to tell you what this is doing. He explains it a little bit here. Accepting standard ins, putting it in a temporary file and immediately opening it, which makes sense. 24-bit color support. Changes it to be non-blocking by default, and using a flag to suppress that behavior. So yeah, if you use Emacs client, I think it will block by default, which makes sense if you're using it as an external editor for other programs, because you want it to return control to the original program after the file gets edited. Okay, package loading. Probably won't spend too much time on this. All right, so let's look at the various packages that tecosaur uses. Window management packages. There's a package called rotate. So this might be the thing that is being used in that rotate key binding before. Emacs rotate. Rotate the layout of Emacs. I've never heard of this one before, actually. This package will help the operation for the multiple windows. Behavior has been prepared with reference to tmux. So that's great, actually. I think that might be really useful. If you have 3 window configurations and you want to rotate them so that, like, maybe if you have a main file that you're editing and a secondary file, then maybe like another window with a shell, you can press a key binding to rotate the position of those. I think it's pretty common in tiling window managers as well. So this might be a useful package if you are into that kind of thing. It can also, oh wow, it rotates the layout too to be like dynamic layout. That's really cool. Yeah, I might have to check this one out. I'll give that one a star. Oh, I'm not logged in. So I'm not starring that right now, but maybe I can drop that in the chat and then, hey Cateru, and then we can grab it later. Okay, so next thing, fun. Okay, let's check out what's in fun here. Oh, there's an XKCD package to get XKCD comics. I didn't know that. Selectric mode. If you want to annoy your spouse or your children or your coworkers, you can use selectric mode to make typewriter sounds when you're typing in Emacs. That has to be really maddening. What is spray? I've never heard of spray before. Emacs spray. An eLisp implementation. Oh, it's a speed reading mode. I'm guessing that's the one that this is. Yeah, so basically it's, if you've ever seen anything like this before, Basically, it's a way to flash words on the screen that are meant to be from written text to make it so that it's easier to digest them. You don't have to move your eyes yourself. It just like flashes them in sequence in front of your eyes. That could be useful if you're trying to read email by just sitting there without moving anything. You're just, you know, like a vegetable, just letting your email be shot into your eyeballs. Let's see. What else is in the fun section? Theme magic. With all our fancy Emacs themes, the terminal is missing out. Let's see. Emacs theme magic. Is this something specific for terminals? Apply your Emacs theme to the terminal. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, this is actually kind of nice. Apply your Emacs theme to the rest of Linux using magic. See, I've thought about this kind of thing before, but I didn't know that anybody had actually done it. So if you've used other... Depending on how far you've gone with Linux customization before, you've probably seen this idea of using like the X resources file to set colors that get used across various applications. Like for instance, if you set your general color settings in X resources and you use like the UXRVT terminal, that will pick up those colors from that config. And there's other programs that might also pick those colors up. So apparently what this package does is takes your theme colors from Emacs and then writes them out to various places like X resources and maybe some other configuration files so that those same colors get used in other programs. So if you use other programs aside from Emacs, which I don't use, but you know, maybe if you use it, then you could use this to maybe have some consistency between your themes. So that's kind of cool. Does this work with Polybar? Because that would be useful for me actually. I don't see it there, but it apparently is using Pywall under the covers, which makes sense because Pywall is a package for doing this sort of thing. But maybe customization, Polybar. It's got to do Polybar. Yes, it does Polybar. I have to try this out because maybe that actually works. Now the next question is, does Geeks have Pywall? Yes, it has Pywall. Okay, well that's good to know. Martin says, isn't it the ultimate goal, a config that allows you to just be vegetable? No, I think for me, it's for me to feel like a ninja in my environment all day long, where I'm just pressing buttons and my mind is one with the machine. Not so much like a vegetable, but more like, you know, having the computer be an extension of my psyche. Let's see. Tecosaur says, so much is lazy loaded, there's no trouble letting it sit there barely used. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So what else? L-Chord. I haven't covered that before, but I've used it in the past. Basically, this is a package for Emacs that allows you to send your currently edited buffer to Discord. I don't know if you know about Discord, but it has this sort of concept of now playing on your profile where it will tell someone what game you're playing. But if you want your Emacs buffer to show up there, you can use L-Chord to do that. It's kind of fun, I guess. Keycast, which I'm using right now, which basically makes the current key binding show up in the mode line. Very useful for screencasting. There's also some custom config being done for that here because Hypershant, because Doom mode line by default does not work very well with Keycast. So those of us who are using Doom or Doom mode line, you have to have a little bit of extra configuration to make that work. And I probably should do this too so that I don't have this weird beige looking key box. It would be better if I could change that. Heath Maelstrom says, I wouldn't mind the reverse, Pywall and set a custom theme off of my background image. Yeah, that would be kind of cool if you could set your Emacs theme based on colors that come from your background image. Let's see, GIF screencast. I haven't used that one before, but that sounds pretty useful. Okay, let's keep moving. All right, so a text extension to Calc, which is interesting. Emacs Everywhere, which is the package that tecosaur maintains. Emacs Speaks Statistics. There's apparently a better data frames view with that. Now this is interesting. Delta is a git diff syntax highlighter written in Rust. The author also wrote a package to hook this into the Magit git diff view. Requires the delta binary. I don't know about that. Let's see. Rust delta diff. What's different about that? Is it just faster? So that does bring up a good point. So one thing that is a problem sometimes in Magit is that when you look at the git status view and you have a lot of files that have been edited that have a lot of changes, it can slow down the rendering of the Magit status buffer a lot. So I wonder if this helps somehow. Probably doesn't, but maybe it just has, oh, okay. It has like better internal line diffing, it seems. That might actually be pretty useful. I might try that out. So this is a package called, well, that's a program called Delta, which you need. Let's actually see if that's in Geeks. I know, sorry for you non-Geeks users, but I always have to look to see if things are in Geeks before I try to use them. Okay, so Delta is here, it seems. Minimizing interesting files. Okay. Yeah, I think that actually is what that means. Lord Debbie says, I don't know if vterm has an equivalent to eShell's find file. I don't think so. Yeah, you just basically need to use Emacs client to open it in Emacs. Yeah, Matthew says, if your Magit status buffer becomes too slow, you may consider removing some groups you don't use often. Yeah, I think really the only place that's really been an issue for me was diffs, though. Info colors. Makes man pages nicer to look at. Well, that's interesting, actually. Let's see what this screenshot looks like, if it loads. Hey, load it. Okay, it doesn't want to load. Oh, there we go, wrong place. Okay, so it looks like it's doing some syntax highlighting or something. Yele says you can integrate vterm and find file. It's a bit convoluted, though. Yeah, probably if you had... Well, no, that's actually true. Because vterm has a way to pick up on things in the output of the terminal and then call Emacs code from it. So I think there actually might be a way to do that. It just, you may have to write a custom alias that is able to output some control characters that vterm picks up on to do something in Emacs. Actually, let's look that up really quick. Emacs vterm. I think that you can do arbitrary Emacs Lisp, but I don't remember for sure. If that's the case, that's actually kind of powerful. Emacs Lisp. Let's see. No. eLisp. Yeah. So there is a way to do that. So apparently, if you write out 51 semicolon vterm printf 51 semicolon and then some Emacs command name, apparently it will allow you to run an Emacs command from inside of vterm. I think that's what's happening. So far, I haven't actually... yeah, okay, so right here, message passing, vterm can read and execute commands at the moment a command is passed by providing a specific escape sequence. So you can basically make message hello get executed in Emacs Lisp by using printf and then having this kind of funky string notation basically to set that in there. So if you wanted to run find file using an alias, you could do it this way. Yeah, that's something I haven't actually tried before, so we learned something together today. All right, so let's see. Info colors, yeah, that was useful. I mean, info is kind of bland. The display of it is kind of bland by default, so this might actually be useful. All right, so Emacs info colors. Let's see what. All right. Oh, okay. So it's Bolanton. I'm sorry if I pronounced his name wrong, but I've seen his packages around before. So basically, he just makes the documentation for Emacs Lisp functions, maybe other stuff as well, have some extra colorization, which can be helpful because they are a little bit hard to read whenever you don't have any kind of hinting. Let's see. Cateru says, what do you think is better, vterm versus eShell? It depends on what you're doing. For me, I use eShell like 90% of the time, and then there's certain commands that I have to use vterm for because they need to use more typical command line input for something. Like they're using command characters and stuff that eShell doesn't support. So yeah, basically I'm using eShell for the most part. But I don't do a whole lot of stuff in the command line anymore because all of my Git behavior is done in Magit. Most of my file management is done in Dired. I have aliases in eShell that I use for updating my system or installing packages. And for running commands for development tools, like, compiling things, I'll use the compile command most of the time so that I can easily recycle compilation. So that's something that is kind of wasteful. If you have to jump to a terminal and then press up to go to your history and press enter, you can just hit a command to just recycle your build on something or tests or whatever. So I don't really use the command line quite as much as I used to because I have things in Emacs that help me with that. Fundrak says, something I really miss from Fish in vterm is abbreviations. Yeah, well, it's very possible that you could do something for that. So that would be cool if you could do that. Lord Devi says he's addicted to his Kitty terminal emulator. Always load that in a buffer for a terminal. Yeah, there's some of these emulators that are really good for their own reasons. I used to use XFCE4 terminal, which is obviously not a great terminal emulator, but it worked. And then I stopped using that once I started using eShell and vterm. Very large file support. If you've ever tried to edit a very large file before in Emacs, you've probably noticed that Emacs slows to a crawl. This VLF package can help with that if you do that pretty frequently. I'm guessing that since tecosaur does some data science related stuff, probably this is going to be large files filled with data annotations or something that he's trying to load and have his computer not choke. Definitions. Okay. Oh, okay. That's cool. Getting definitions for words. What I really need is a thesaurus. Okay, so apparently there's some various things you can use for that, and there is, what is lexic? Emacs lexic. Okay, so apparently this is tecosaur's own package. Fancy Emacs integration with the what is it? Console version of StarDict. I've never heard of StarDict before. Is that in Geeks? This is the question I have to ask myself all the time. StarDict. No, not in Geeks. Another opportunity for someone to package something for Geeks. Presuming that it is something that runs on Linux. Let's look it up anyway. StarDict. Because I haven't heard of that before. The best dictionary program in Linux and Windows. Well, that's cool. And it's license? GPL. So definitely that could go into Geeks. Okay, ebook reading. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Okay, obviously we want to look at the org mode config because I don't want to spend too much more time. We've already been talking about this for an hour. And if this ever gets boring, just tell me because I can kind of move on. I know I'm just sort of just reading a config and looking up links. Improve agenda capture using Alpha Papa's super agenda, which probably is a good thing to do. There's also doct. I forgot the name of the person who made this, but they've shown up on the stream before. Let's see, doct. If I search it, I'm sure I'll find them. I think it's NV. Come on, Emacs doct. Basically, it's an easier way to set up your capture templates. Procfolio, okay. So this is basically a DSL or a domain-specific language for making capture templates. If you've ever written capture templates for org before, this syntax is a little bit annoying to maintain. So you can use this little bit better syntax to make it easier for you to write your templates, which I think is kind of useful. You can also set hooks on your capture templates, which is actually possible to do without this package, but this makes it easier to do. So yeah, we have some improvements to those things here. Visual improvements. Org pretty table. I've not heard of that one before. Org pretty, come on. Pretty table. That might be nice because by default the tables are nice, but they're not pretty, I would say. Very experimental and no screenshots, so we can't tell what it looks like. I'm guessing, excuse me, what it's doing is probably using better characters for the table line characters, maybe like the pipe characters or something, who knows. If you've ever used the calfw package, I think it does something similar where for drawing a calendar display, it uses better characters that look a lot nicer. Well, no, maybe not by default. Maybe I set that up. That's probably what happened. In my cal FW config, I use better characters, so that's what happened. All right. Miguel says that I revived his love for Emacs. It was just my editor. Now I'm rethinking everything around Emacs again. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because it's basically, that's sort of the point of Emacs. I think people don't get that whenever they start using it, but you can replace a lot of the things you do with your computer with stuff in Emacs, which is pretty cool. Org fragtog, which is a very interesting package name. Toggling LaTeX fragment previews. Somebody asked me about that the other day on the Discord. And then org appear, which is a great package written by someone who's also a member of the Discord. I want to say AWTH. Yeah, AWTH13 wrote org appear, which is very useful. And Jafer, another person who may be on the stream right now, but is definitely in the Discord, contributed some things to this. SPFab as well. So that's a useful package that I'm using these days. Yeah, tecosaur says that the pretty table is drawing box characters instead of ASCII characters. Org superstar mode. Oh, org pretty tags. I haven't seen that before. There's all kinds of little nuggets here. Pretty tags. By Marco Wall. Any screenshots? Okay. Okay, so basically you can change a particular tag to either an emoji or some other substring, it seems, which could be useful if you wanted to change the display of those things. There's an interesting property of Emacs where you can do these overlays inside of buffers to replace text. That's sort of how these things like org appear and things like it work, where even though there's certain text in a buffer, you can change the display of that text to make it look like something else. So there's a whole class of packages you can find for Emacs that do things like this, where it takes a fragment of text and replaces it with something. Yeah, SPFab is here. All right, let's see. So let's see, what else? OXGFM for GitHub flavor markdown. I think this is all export related stuff. And orgref for citations. Orgraphview, that's cool. I don't think I've, oh, is that Alpha Papa yet again? I think Alpha Papa is probably the patron saint of org packages by this point. What was that now? After I had to say that, I forgot the name. Orgraphview. All right, let's see what this looks like. Work in progress, not packaged yet. Well, people are using it, Adam, so you might as well package it by this point. Feel free to use and give feedback. It looks like it's basically just making graphs for the things in the document. How does it make relationships between things, though? Just through the hierarchy? Yeah, it looks like it. And apparently Alpha Papa is making some pulled pork, so hopefully he invites me over to dinner, because I'm really hungry right now. Org chef. Oh, that's interesting. Org chef. Apparently it's a recipe thing in org mode, which is great, because I actually was talking to my wife recently about that. We needed to take some of our recipes and store them. And I was like, hey, we should use Emacs. And she's like, don't ever talk to me again. So yeah, basically just a way to capture recipes. And maybe there's like custom properties for certain aspects of cooking that are not native to org mode. Might be pretty useful. I think you can do imports from certain websites too. Org Roam server. If you've not used Org Roam before, there's actually a server that you can use for showing a graph of your Org Roam references, which actually makes a lot more sense because Org Roam is meant to be more like networked notes where you have links between many different documents. So the actual server here is quite useful, I think. I haven't used it yet, but I definitely have seen people talking about it and seen screenshots of it, which looks pretty cool. Systemd package. Some people will probably be vomiting right now, but you know, I don't have a problem with Systemd, but I don't have to use it, thank God, because I use GNU Geeks. Let's see. Stan is probabilistic programming language written in C++. All right. I have not heard of that. Stan programming language. So it's another statistical thing, it seems. which makes sense because they use the word probabilistic. Used to specify a Bayesian statistical model with an imperative program. That sounds cool. It's way over my head, though. I'm just a meek little programmer. You know, I'm not, you know, good with all the mathematical things of the world. GraphViz, being able to make graphs from .dot files, which is pretty useful. Authinfo, I think we saw something about that before, but we have to, oh, authinfo color, what is that? I've never heard of that before. Oh, okay, that's why, it's because Tecosaur wrote it. So it's a simple iteration on authinfo. Is it like a better file format? Tell me more about that, Tecosaur. Kateru says, is there a way to set custom keyboard layout in GNU Geeks? Yes, there is. If you have in your configuration, well, I don't know how custom we're talking here, but you can set keyboard layout here, and you'll have to look up how these packages are defined for keyboard layouts, but there is a way to change your keyboard layout. Oh, authinfo color was merged into Emacs 28. Okay, so basically it's just syntax highlighting for authinfo files. I think I've actually seen that being used before. Mine have been highlighted, so maybe that's why. Good job. Go back to tecosaur's config. All right, so let's... So I mentioned Avi before. Apparently, Tecosaur is already using Avi. Also, he's changing the default set of keys because he's using Colmac, which is pretty hardcore. So the set of home row keys are different for Colmac, apparently. I've never used Colmac before, so I have no idea what the keys are supposed to be. Yeah, and Avi, if you don't know, is for jumping to different positions in a buffer. Let's see, can I do Control Space JW? So that runs Avi jump word, I think, and then it gives me all these little character sequences that I can type in the buffer. So if I wanted to go to this place right here, I just type GD, and then my cursor goes right to that location. Looking at the tangle condition, thank you for reminding me. So there's a condition here to decide whether to tangle this, and I've actually never seen Emacs list be used as a condition like this before, but that's actually kind of awesome. Very, very useful. So basically, he's checking dmessage to see if there's an Ergodox keyboard that's plugged into the computer before he exports this block of configuration. So that's pretty interesting. I mean, I guess at the same time, you could just like put a if statement around this and do the same thing to do like a live evaluation whenever your Emacs starts up. But I guess it makes sense because you're probably not going to change the computer you're using the config on. Or maybe unplug the keyboard or whatever, or plug it in later. Calculator defaults, calc text, embedded calc. I don't know about embedded calc. Use calc to operate on LaTeX math expressions. Okay, that's cool. A lot of custom code here. Centaur tabs. Whoops. Yep. I haven't used Centaur tabs yet. I mean, Emacs has its own built-in tab stuff, but Centaur tabs might be better for certain reasons. Company mode config. Yeah, I mean, company mode config is important because the default config is kind of annoying depending on what editors you've used before. I think I remember Tecosaur saying that he used VS Code before Emacs, if I'm not mistaken. So probably this configuration is meant to be more like other IDEs where you have a certain delay before the pop-up shows. Let's see, plain text. Okay, so more ESS config. Setting the backend for ESS mode. Oh, yeah, company backend. Okay, makes sense. Doom mode line config. Custom segments. That's cool. I haven't actually done it myself, but I kind of want to, so. Let's see. So buffer name segment, current buffer's name without any other information. So basically, what, like, is this replacing the buffer name segment that already exists? That would be kind of cool. Okay, no, he's replacing the entire mode line definition for Doom mode line. I don't know what this first symbol does, but the rest, Oh, for PDFs, he's basically blanking it out, it seems. Maybe this means that for PDF modes, there's no mode line information, but then for everything else, the normal bar, it shows the window number, PDF pages, blah, 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 or maybe it's just for PDF mode. I'm making a lot of assumptions here, so maybe tecosaur will have to explain what that part does. Yeah, Matthew says, if I recall, Doom already does large amounts of customization on company already, like enabled specific backends on a mode basis or something like that. Yeah, that makes sense. And tecosaur says that this part just does the PDF mode line, which is pretty cool. You can do a mode line specifically for that. Use major mode as main icon. Haven't seen that before. Do I have Elcord installed? Nope. Can't find that one. All right, so Emacs Everywhere config, basically setting the frame name format and using org mode by default. That's cool. So if you're using org mode by default to edit content of text from other programs, does it export it to HTML whenever it sends the text back to the original program? Emojify, basically setting emojis in buffers. Disabled emojis. Okay, that makes sense. I've used, oh, you can set the emoji set. That's cool. Yeah, I was using Emojify. Do I still use it? Yeah, apparently I do. But I only use it in ERC, apparently. Jacob says, if you haven't heard, try deft package using Emacs in order to easy access all information you store over the years. I do have it installed, but I don't use it that much. I typically use console RG to use ripgrep to search through things, but I think deft may be faster for certain use cases. tecosaur says, uses pandoc to export to Markdown if it recognizes Markdown as desire for the app it was called from. That's cool. So basically, if you're editing a text box on GitHub, then it can export Markdown to put back there. That's pretty nice. Okay, this is my config now. We're not detecting my config, so let's go away. Eros eval makes the result of. Oh, okay, that's cool. I've never heard this before. Eros eval, but I think I know what this means. Did you write that? Maybe is that why it's not showing up on packages? Probably. I think I saw that in your Lisp folder. Let's see. No, not here. Eros. Interesting. Must be from Doom. But I only see it on, oh, evaluation result overlays. Okay, someone else. Hey, go away. Where is this hosted? It's on GitHub. It didn't show up at all in search. So this is cool. This actually might be useful for the Learning Emacs Lisp series. Basically what it does is when you evaluate a Emacs Lisp expression in a buffer that has this turned on, it will put an overlay after the expression showing the result. I think I should probably use this because it's pretty useful for showing things without having to make people look at the echo area, which is something that I'm doing a lot in that series, which is not ideal, but it works. So that's a cool one to keep an eye on. All right, let's see. Anything cool in the magic config? Not really. Pretty nice by default, I agree. Ivy config, nothing too special there. Evil config, anything cool there? After evil escape. Oh, tecosaur says it's more than just elisp that it can do. That's cool. Substitution, global more often than not. Okay, that makes sense. I'm so used to doing the global substitution anyway that I don't set that. Mixed pitch fonts, wow. Some definite customizations here, basically. Yeah. Not really parsing that at the moment. Org chef, okay. Projectile, setting basically the default, or the ignored projects paths. That's cool. Smart parentheses, nothing there. Oh, okay. I guess doing automatic completion of the open and close angle brackets for no web in org mode files. Theme magic. So a lot of the packages we saw mentioned before, now we're getting into the customization for them. All right. Yeah, write room is kind of interesting as a sort of focused writing mode. This is where the serif text seems to come into play. Yeah, use a serif variable pitch font. Use fleurons. I don't even know what a fleuron is a headline bullet. And as you can see, I don't have my Unicode character set up correctly, so these don't show up. But they look very nice anyway. There's a screenshot that we can check out here if we want to see what this looks like for tecosaur. Come on. Oh. Come on, man. There we go. It looks really nice. Yeah, in lieu of actually being able to start this configuration, which we might not be able to. Let's see. Igor asks, is there something like Eros but using post frame? You know, that would be really interesting. And I don't see why you couldn't do something like that. Obviously, LSP mode is using post frame for documentation strings, so you could probably do the same thing for Eros, just like as a hook, or maybe just using the same behavior, but just using some hooks into post frame yourself. So that would actually be really interesting to see. It might be really useful, I think. XKCD. I think that tecosaur is a big fan of XKCD. All right. So let me just zip through anything else interesting here, because we've already been talking about this for about an hour and a half, and I want to talk about a couple other things before we go. So let's see. Whoops. Okay, so the HTML export, let's actually take a look at tecosaur's website, because that's sort of one of the main points why I wanted to show his configuration. So let's see, tecosaur Emacs config. And we're going to load up the HTML version, and we'll see if, yeah, I think my browser is going to destroy the rendering. Let me turn on the dark mode. Oh, man. Okay, I think it actually worked. That's good. All right, so the thing about this config is that it's very nicely presented. As you can see, there's a table of contents here on the right-hand side, kind of like a floating table of contents. I'm not sure if that's custom or if that's something that actually is part of the default HTML output, but it may be custom CSS. Very nice font selection. We've got the output, or the last updated time, basically, the date and time here, basically, and the commit hash on the repo, which is pretty cool. And then, like I mentioned, tecosaur has the commentary about Emacs and basically why he chose to use Emacs, which is pretty useful if you're interested in this sort of thing. Unfortunately, the images aren't showing up, or I guess the text and the images aren't showing up very well, because I think my my settings in Qt browser are kind of causing confusion for it. But some really interesting things in here as far as, like, you know, some graphs that he's put into place and some tables, some example source code, or configuration code, I suppose. And as I mentioned, he seems to be a fan of XKCD because XKCD comics show up more than once, I think, in this config. And a nice table here about, like, the things we mentioned before, and then a really nice graph that basically graphs these same things out. And this must be getting generated as well. And this is also a very nice little touch. You have these blocks that have the exclamation point warning symbol next to it. I would love to steal that and put that onto the System Crafters website, I think. And how does that actually look? Let me search for the word insidious. Insidious. So, okay, so basically you've got a warning block. Is that something that's part of org mode, or did you make it yourself? Because that's actually really cool. All right. So, another XKCD comic. Requirements. So yeah, so now we're back to all the config sections we've been looking at before. It seems that the table of contents section is also expanding dynamically based on which section we're currently in, which is pretty cool. I think these sections are also linkable, so you could go to a certain one. And apparently whenever you click one of the headings, it has a little arrow that shows up to the left-hand side. That's a nice touch. Let's see. Anything else sort of obviously stands out here? This block looks different. Why is that? Oh, it's an image, that's why. A lot of stuff in here. Some screenshots to make things look nice. Some more screenshots. Just trying to see what else I can find that might be cool. Which was that for? Oh, that was the info colors. More XKCD, more XKCD. A lot of emojis. I guess this is like a completion list for emojis. Oh, it's for Circe. Okay, so that's cool. So apparently he's using Circe for IRC, which I think is a good client. I've used it before. All right, let's see if I can scroll a little bit faster through here. That's not working. Now I'm going to have to use the godforsaken mouse. Oh, whoa, what is that? That's text. That's cool. What did you generate this with? Is this like a dot graph or something? Let's see. What's extensible methods? Okay, so this must be generated from an external tool, but it looks pretty cool in my rendering, which is pretty awesome. That's really fancy. Tecosaur says, begin star has well-defined behavior when exporting to LaTeX CSS, so you can style them appropriately. Great. That's cool. Yeah, Matthew says he's also thinking about having his configuration in its own page. Yeah, you know, I think it's kind of cool to do that. I mean, it's really easy to let GitHub do the rendering for you, or maybe even GitLab. But there's something to be said for having your own config site, which, as we saw in maybe the stream before last, I was showing off the one that I had made. I feel like it's kind of cool to have your own site. Mine obviously does not look anywhere near as nice as Tecosaur's does, but I kind of like the idea of having my own place where I can show people my config and still get some of the same benefits, like, you know, having anchors to certain sections and whatnot. So it's nice to have that functionality. Or, I guess, control over your own config site to make it look how you want. What is that? Oh, that's cool. So for Tecosaur's capture templates, he's got icons for the various ones that he has there, which look really nice. That UI is pretty basic by default. Let's scroll some more. I missed something. I think screen rendering is not enjoying this very much. More XKCD. Looks like we're in the LaTeX section here. Just looking for anything else interesting to see. What was that? Oh, we got some funky characters here. What section is this? More LaTeX config, I think. What about... Okay, so snippet section. I think there's some cool snippet configuration in here, but it's not actually going there. So there's a lot of snippets. What mode uses these? Is it YaSnippet? Let's go down toward the bottom here in this document. Snippets. Stand snippets, is that what that is? Oh, yeah, Tecosaur says most of the cool stuff is under the org language configuration. Language configuration, org mode, system config. That's cool. So basically a MIME type configuration file for opening in Emacs, I suppose. Okay, let me jump back over to the real config for this. Wow. Tecosaur says the org config for language features is like half the configuration size. So let's see, org language configuration. Okay, so there's more analysis on why org mode is good here, I think. And this is what we had been seeing before. I kind of caught this earlier. Git diffs. Whoops, wanted to do that. So helpful article and changed how the git diff chunk heading to something more useful, and then just the immediate line. So basically better diffing for org mode files. That's kind of useful. And a lot of stuff here for, it's testing package from the mailing list. So maybe we're doing some contributions to the org mode repo, I suppose. Maybe that's what that means. Org mailing list select patch thread. That's cool. So basically some custom code for pulling in packages from the org mode mailing list. That's pretty hardcore. Tweaking defaults for org. Export in background? Whoa, really? Is that a real thing? When did this start? In org version 8. Okay, that's only for export and publishing, I suppose. It's not for tangling, I guess. I guess it would be useful if you're exporting your content directly from inside of your running Emacs session. For me, I'm just running it in batch mode using a script, so I don't have the same problem. Let's see. Visual line mode is turned on. Autofill mode is turned off. Okay. List bullet sequence. Yeah, just some general customizations here. Using org ref for citations. Okay, LSP support in source blocks. Now that's useful because people ask about that a lot, and I think it's something that people want to do. So org babel language list for each one of those. Oh, okay. So apparently there's a function from LSP. Is there? Oh, is that yours? Okay, LSP org babel enable. Set q Centaur LSP. That must be something else. Centaur LSP, is that a package? It's coming from Centaur Emacs. Okay, so tecosaur says that LSP in source blocks did work, but now it's a little bit dodgy. That makes sense. So basically this whole section here was probably stolen from Centaur Emacs. That makes sense. Well, definitely if someone wants to check that out, look at this section of tecosaur's config because that would be useful. Viewing the exported files, super agenda, capture templates. Whoa. Okay, so basically this is where we get the nice little icons for the different capture templates. They're not actually set up. Okay, so this little icon syntax here is probably what's being picked up by this function. Icon declaration to icon. Iconify capture templates. Blah, 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 blah. We're just basically looping over everything and replacing that section, I think, with the icon. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, if you want to have nice icons in your capture templates, then you should bug tecosaur to maybe pull this out into a separate package that you can install and then put into your own templates. I don't want to give you more work, tecosaur. All right, so let's see. Org MKS pretty, select member of an A list with multiple keys. Wow, okay. An A list on, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, that's some E list code, as you can see. Org capture bin? What is that? Oh, okay. So it's a command line. Okay, is that yours? Definitely not mine. I don't have that there. It must be from your config. So let's see. Or is that's from Doom Emacs? So Doom Emacs bin org capture. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, there's Doom Emacs has its own org capture command that you can run from the command line, which will allow you to invoke a capture template with a string, which actually might be pretty useful to steal because sometimes I do want to do that, maybe from Qt browser to be able to store a link to something. All right, so org roam seems like tecosaur is using org roam, which makes a lot of sense because org roam is good stuff. And let's see, registering org roam protocol. This is for doing org protocol links from browsers, I think. And also even with a desktop file. That's cool. Graph behavior. Okay, so Okay, there's one last couple things that are interesting here that I saw. Apparently, there is a custom implementation of a music player from org mode files. I just saw this while scanning through yesterday. I don't think this is a package. I think this is something that tecosaur just wrote inside of his config, which is kind of cool. It's using Empress to play music from particular artists, I think. And if you're using Empress, maybe it's calling, okay, Media Player 2. So do you have an example of a file, tecosaur, where you have like your music listing or something like that? Because this is pretty interesting code, but it's hard to tell how it works in practice without an actual file to look at. Probably you don't have that public anywhere, which makes sense. And then org link set parameters, basically to make it so that you can insert links easily to music. Oh, that's for exports. That's not actually for, wow, that's a lot of code for exports. And also we have this nice little YouTube export link thing. I think I've used something like this before as well. All right, I think that we're gonna stop around this point on looking at the config. I might try to run it again just really quickly, but it may not work. I don't want to spend too much time on config. I don't know how long to spend on someone's config, but obviously, whenever you have someone's configuration that's been written for a while, they get to be pretty big because, you know, as Emacs starts to take over more of your life and more of the things you do, you're gonna have a lot of stuff in your configuration file. So I think this is probably bigger than my config overall, so there's a lot of customization in here. Kateru asks, when I use projectile toggle tests, it asks for app.js or app.ts. Is there any way to set .ts as the default? I don't know, but maybe somebody in the chat will know. Okay, let me jump back to eShell and see if I can try one more time to make this run. So what I've done here is I've set the Doom dir to the place where I've cloned tecosaur's code, which is what the Doom documentation tells me to do. And then I use bin doom run inside of the folder where I've cloned Doom Emacs. Now, whenever I run that, it actually doesn't load tecosaur's config, it loads my config, and I don't know why. So what I might try to do is just hack it really quickly to see if I can fix that problem. I'm gonna jump out of that really quick. See you, Eric. Thanks for being here. All right, so let's look really quickly at, let's check it early init, see what they do in here. Do they even look for Doom? No. What about, oh, let's look at the bin script, the bin/doom script, and look for Doom here. So we need to set Emacs dir. Ensure Doom runs out of this file's parent directory where Doom is presumably installed. Use the Emacs div in var to change this. So if Emacs dir, yeah, I don't know if it works as well with Doom. I could try it, but maybe it won't work. I don't know. The problem is that it doesn't set the user Emacs directory, and then other things are going to start getting pulled from my own .files folder, and I think that's not going to work very well. So I'm trying to do it in an isolated way if possible. So we're getting the environment variable. If it's there, we're setting file name as directory. Oh, file name is directory. Okay, we're basically expanding that. So if Emacs dir is set, it uses that for a user Emacs directory. And I've also set that, and it didn't seem to do anything, which is really weird. Doom code. Yeah, Paul, I would use Emacs, but I haven't actually set that up yet. I don't know how I would set that up with my configuration, because it kind of requires that it takes over your Emacs.d folder, and I'm not set up for that at the moment. Okay, so let me just look again. Oh, wait, there's some stuff down here, I think. If you symlink the Doom script, Emacs dir environment variable, blah, 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 blah. If string match. Okay, I think that's just for syncing the config. Well, I do have, you know what? I'll bet that eShell has something to do with this. Let me run it in vterm instead. So export doom dir. Oh, let's try it. Doom dir equals detective slash tecosaur slash Emacs config. Then echo doom dir. All right, now let's run bin doom run. This seems nope, same problem. Not exactly sure what's happening. I wonder if Geeks has something to do with it. Not to blame it on Geeks or anything, but you know. Cateru asks, when is the next GNU Geeks video? It's going to be either Monday or Wednesday. That's really weird. Let me try setting the Emacs directory specifically. If that doesn't work, I have no idea what's happening. So let's export Doom Emacs. Then set Emacs dir. So now if I run, come on, bin doom run. I don't think it's gonna work. Yep, once again, it's pulling my my profile from Geeks, which it shouldn't do. Okay, I'm gonna try one last thing. I'm gonna use the, whoops, I'm typing shell commands into the chat now, as you can see. All right, so I'm gonna use init.el here. I don't think it's gonna pick up early init though. I wonder if that's gonna be a problem. So let's try it, emacs-q-l init.el. This is probably gonna fail hard. Or not. It's doing something. Okay, so it's not finding the fonts it's looking for. I think we got a little bit of success. Let's pull that over to this window now. The font is very small because probably tecosaur is not using a high DPI display, or maybe the font setup is causing it to not work. But the space commands are probably working. Let's see. I probably need to turn on exwm input toggle keyboard in this buffer so that key bindings go through correctly. Hello. Okay, space isn't working by default. That's interesting. I wonder if there's any errors that showed up. You probably cannot read this at all just because it's so small. Yeah, let's download emojis. I'll use text. Whoa. Okay, that's taking way too long. All right, so now let me check text scale. Yeah, that only works in the buffer. Did anybody remember the command to use for setting the font size across the entire editor? Probably there isn't one. Yeah, missing font stuff. Anyway, we do see that there are some things happening here with configuration. However, I don't think that space is working. Doom likes Doom sync. So I have to use sync first? Is that what happened? Let me jump out of this really quick. Yes, kill that. And then bin slash doom slash sync. Maybe that's not worth doing right now. Anyway, another example of how, you know, trying to run someone else's configuration is difficult. I think that if I were to do this successfully the next time, I would have to run it in a VM or something, or maybe a separate user account on my machine so that I can have a completely standalone normal Emacs setup, or I could try to use Chemax, but even that might be a problem. So maybe I'll come up with a good strategy for showing the actual configurations in the future. But for now, I think it's good enough just to be able to look at the configuration files and see what kind of interesting things we can pull out of there. I mean, I think we learned about at least 5 interesting variables and probably about 7 to 10 packages that at least I haven't heard of. So hopefully that was interesting to you for this instance of the Dotfile Detective series. And I probably won't do another one of these until maybe a couple weeks from now, because I don't want it to get boring doing the same thing over and over again. But if you have a suggestion for anyone who has a cool Emacs configuration, or even another type of program, maybe Vim or whatever, I mean, probably it's more likely we'll focus on Emacs, then let me know either in the comments of the video or in the chat or on Discord or whatever, and I'll be happy to take a look at them. And if you want to suggest your own configuration, that's totally cool too. You should do that. So just let me know if you want me to take a look at yours. And I'm just going to put together a list of configs I'm going to look at over time, because I think it's pretty useful to go through this process. Tomas says that Control-Z switches Doom into Emacs key binding mode. Maybe you were already in that mode. That's possible, yeah. Let's see. So after that section, what I wanted to do is just briefly look at some Emacs news. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, a nice commenter named, I think it's Andy, mentioned to me in a comment saying basically that they can't make it to the live streams from Australia, because Australia is on a very different time zone than the US. So luckily, many people from around the world are able to make it here, but our Australian crafters are not able to make it. So I just want to give a shout out to all those people who are probably asleep right now, but hopefully you can at least watch the recording and let me know what you think. All right, so for some Emacs news. One thing to be aware of is that org mode is not going to be having their own ELPA repository anymore. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but there was an email on the Emacs org mode mailing list, I want to say a few days ago, basically to mention this. Oh, and also one last thing. Thank you so much, tecosaur, for letting me look at your config on the stream. I really appreciate that. And you have a very nice configuration. As you can see here, a lot of people are commenting kindly about it. So thank you for the opportunity to take a look at that. Back to the news. So let's open up this mailing list mail really quick. Basically, I think they're trying to make it easier for themselves to maintain at this point. I think that Bastian is stepping down as maintainer at some point soon, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they're trying to make it a little bit simpler for them to ship new versions and not maintain their own ELPA package repository. So previously, if you wanted to get the latest fixes to, or latest improvements to org mode, you would use this org mode ELPA repository for package.el, and you could get the newest releases, excuse me, the newest releases of org mode. But now they're going to split where the packages live. The org package itself is going to be living in the normal GNU ELPA repo, which is good because it's actually the main repo that Emacs uses by default for package.el. So you should be able to get org updated pretty easily without having to change your configuration. However, if you use the org contrib package, which has a lot of extra functionality for org mode, which you might not be using it by default. Certain people use it because it has interesting stuff in there. You'll have to use the non-GNU ELPA repository, which is basically the same as the ELPA repo, but it's for packages that are not, I think they're not GNU packages. They're not copyright assigned to Free Software Foundation GPL 3. So they may be GPL, but they're not copyrighted by the FSF, I think. So if we look at the camel package here that's on this non-GNU ELPA, oh, let's not look at that one because we have to go to the OCaml repo. Let's look at request here. Excuse me. So if we check out this repo and look at the license, it's a GPL license, but the copyright is, well, it doesn't say who the copyright is, I think. Anyway, basically the idea is that these are packages that cannot be used in the default GNU ELPA repository. So now there's a separate repository for those things. I don't know if this is new or if it's been around for a while, but obviously there's not many packages there yet. So I don't know if there's something going on where they're trying to use this instead of Melpa because they don't like Melpa for some reason. That's just my sort of uninformed opinion or guess, I suppose you could say. But the point is, eventually the org contrib package is going to live here. So if you want that package or new updates to that package, you're going to have to use this repository in your configuration. I've got a little bit of a example here of how you would change your package archives variable to do that. Probably you already have the org package repo here in your config. You need to take that out and then add the non-GNU package repository instead. So not very hard to respond to in configuration. I don't know that it is time to try this yet because they're going to wait till the next update of org mode before they start doing this. So just keep that in mind. At some point, your org mode is going to stop updating if you're using the org mode repository, and you're going to have to switch to the GNU repo for that, or package repo for that. Matthew says a good way to explore the configs would be in a VM, perhaps, if it's easier. Yeah, I thought about using a VM today, but using a VM plus OBS at the same time slows things down so much that I would try to avoid it. So I might not be able to avoid it in the future. All right, next thing. Paul says Stallman was talking about this recently. He may have come up with it or maybe just took credit. Well, I think Stallman has had a problem with Melpa for a while. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did a talk on this at the Emacs conf that just happened a few months ago, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want to know more why this thing exists, go check out his talk there. But I think that, as usual, he has sort of philosophical disagreements with a lot of things that are in the ecosystem. So he decides to go and do it himself. So if you would rather use the non-GNU ELPA instead of Melpa, then you should do that. However, you're not going to get all the same packages because people would have to add their packages to that for it to show up for you. So I'm not sure what the story is on that, but Melpa works great for me. So I'm using that for a lot of things. All right. So another thing that is a noteworthy item. So the MU4E package that we've talked about in the Emacs mail series, the current stable release is somewhere in the 1.4 range, but they're working towards the next stable release series, which is 1.6. There's some news here about that. One interesting visible change for that would be that the message view for MU4E, when you look at your actual message contents for a given message, previously it was using some other, I don't know, maybe a simpler view, I suppose. Now they're going to use the GNU's message view by default, which apparently has some extra behavior and deals with things like calendar invites, etc. better. So this actually seems to be an improvement to the interface for MU4E, but it's something to be aware of that might happen within the next few months whenever they release that new version 1.6. However, if you want to try it before then, there's actually a variable you can use now in the 1.4 series. If you set the MU4E view use GNUs to T, set that variable to T, then whenever you open a message buffer, it will use the GNUs view instead. I tried it this morning. It doesn't look very different, but if they say it's better, I'll believe them until I figure out otherwise. So it's something to keep in mind if you want to try that out before that release comes out. There is a Reddit post about this by the author of MU4E, if it will load up. And giving some details about it, they've been working on the 1.5 branch for around a year. It seems that they use a similar versioning approach to the Linux kernel where you have sort of an alternating development and stable version number. So 1.4 is a stable, and then 1.5 is development, then 1.6 will be stable again. So it sounds like they've been doing enough work in 1.5 that now they're ready to move it on to 1.6. And if you want to see what things have changed, you can look at the news file that's linked there. There's some things that have changed for the indexer mu itself, or mu, or however you want to say it. And then a lot of the other stuff, the first thing being GNUs, the GNUs view for messages. And then some maildir shortcuts information, various different things. Tab completion for writing mu queries, which is kind of interesting. So maybe there's some useful stuff there that you should check out if you use MU4E and you like it a lot. There could be some improvements that are useful to you. Antonio asks, does Geeks use systemd? No, it uses GNU Shepherd. Yeah, it has its own init system written in Guile scheme. And lastly, I wanted to point out that the Emacs had a 27.2 release. Not much happened in this, or at least not much that's a user visible change. I'll open up those release notes really quick, if they show up in the right window. Yeah, this is starting to get annoying. Let's go back there. All right, so basically, it says it's a bug fix release with no new features, which is pretty typical for one of these point releases on Emacs. They've changed something about this resize mini frames. which is a user option. Basically, if you set it to a non-nil value, which is not a function, it will resize the mini frame using a new function they added called fit mini frame to buffer. I don't know exactly what the use case is for this, but someone in Discord told me that they had issues with the way that things were showing up in Emacs after updating to 27.2. So I wonder if this somehow had an impact on that. So if you're having weird issues with frames not showing correctly or windows not showing correctly, maybe take a look at this setting and see if maybe you should change it to get better results. If there is an issue, you should definitely file or send an email to the Emacs devel list potentially to report the issue there. They also changed something about Tramp. They basically obsoleted one of the user options there. And then on non-free operating systems, basically non-GNU Linux operating systems, I suppose, Emacs now ignores modifier keys when IME input is used. So if you have, I guess IME is being able to use non-English keyboard characters, I'm guessing. By default, pressing Control, Shift, and Alt keys while using IME will no longer apply the modifiers to the produced characters. Probably that's useful because maybe it caused confusion to people who expected their control characters to do some kind of key input in IME mode whenever Emacs is trying to use that as a key binding or something. So another thing to keep in mind. However, these point releases, if you don't know about how Emacs version numbers work, whenever Emacs is working on a new version, like let's say 28 is the one in development right now, it's considered to be 28.0. But they're basically developing that to the point where they get ready to make an actual release for the public, like a stable release, and that release will be 28.1. So all of these stable releases that are being pushed to the public are 0.1 releases. And then over time, if bugs show up or if they have to make any slight improvements to things, they're going to do another point release. So in this case, it's 27.2. It varies on each major version of Emacs about whether they do multiple of these. Emacs 26 had 1.1, 0.2, and 0.3. So they had three revisions basically, or like maybe 2 revisions after the main stable release. 27 has only had another one so far, just one update after 27.1. And in theory, Emacs 28 would probably happen either later this year or maybe early next year. So maybe there won't be a 27.3 because it seems 27 is pretty stable if you can tell by the small list of improvements in 27.2. So just an interesting thing to note about Emacs development. I would have guessed that more people are starting to use Emacs 28 in development mode now because of the new improvements for performance with Emacs native comp. So maybe 27.2 is irrelevant to you because you're not even using 27 anymore. Cateru says, can I make a Centaur tabs tutorial? I would look at that in the future for sure. It probably will be a while before I get there because I've got a lot of videos to do before then. So yeah, that was it for the news for this week. I want to thank Satya Chua for every week putting out her Emacs news posts, which I obviously stole these links from. But it's a good place to find out what the latest news is in the Emacs community. So definitely check out her website. Let's see, Emacs news. See if I can pull that up really easily. Yeah, satyachua.com/categories/Emacs news. You'll see all the articles there. So I basically just went through this list and found the things I thought were interesting and brought them up. So we got a couple more minutes if anybody else has any questions. Defragged asks, are there any special considerations if I wanted to move from standard Emacs to Doom around EXWM, or will the switch be seamless? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think that they do very much heavy configuration of EXWM, but somebody who actually uses Doom would have to comment on that. Fundrak says, I can't wait for the PGTK and native comp branches to be merged in master. Have you tried them together? Somebody put together a merged branch. I want to say it's probably Flat Watson. I haven't tried it. I've heard that PGTK is faster, and then that plus native comp is even faster. So that would be great if it was the case. Sishu asks, hi David, how do you display the key presses and functions on the mode line? Your dot files still have post frame config. Yes, I'm using KeyCast now. It's a package called KeyCast. If you look at my config and search for KeyCast, you'll find it. Let me just pull that up. KeyCast. Yeah, so it's right below that post frame configuration if you look in that same block. I need to pull it out to its own separate block so I can link to it more easily. Juanito says, when I use Geeks GC to delete unused packages, it deletes all the dependencies too. All that is all downloaded again if I download another package. Is there a way to avoid that? The reason why it's deleting those is because it doesn't think that any other profile that you have is using them. And a lot of times the reason why they're there to begin with is because they were used to build something and they're not needed for normal operation of the thing that you used. GTK sounds like one that it probably shouldn't be deleting, but you never know. There may be a reason why it was done like that. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Geeks is generally pretty smart about not deleting things that are still needed. So if you delete those things and then they get installed again, it's because you're installing something else that needs them. Yeah, so it also says, or do I have a totally wrong idea about what Geeks GC does? Yeah, Geeks GC looks at all your active profiles, all your active Geeks profiles, and sees which packages are currently in use, and then anything else that's in the GNU store, the /GNU/store path that isn't being used, it just basically just deletes it. Defrag says, I keep losing windows in EXWM. Is there a shortcut to find a window across all workspaces? Yes, there is. Well, yes. If you use EXWM workspace switch to buffer, it will give you a list of, well, is that right? Switch. Yeah. So EXWM workspace switch to buffer will show you, I think, all of the windows. Well, it's not showing me the nightly windows right now, which is interesting. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, it will show you all buffers, basically. And you can select one of those, and what it will do by default is it will jump you to the workspace that has that window, and it will make that window visible. So it is necessary sometimes. Like, for instance, and maybe this is actually the problem that you see too. When I run Discord, sometimes, whenever Discord finishes loading, somehow EXWM loses it. The buffer is still there, you can switch to it, but it just doesn't display it. It doesn't focus the window whenever Discord stops loading. So I have to use either that buffer switching command or just a normal buffer switch command to find that buffer. So it's just a weird thing that EXWM does sometime, and I think it's probably program specific. Lord Devi asks, David, how often do you listen to the Hacker soundtrack while you work? Well, I don't listen to the soundtrack per se. I actually watch the movie while I work sometimes. So yeah, that's what I do. Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, Defragged has the same problem. Yeah, I don't know why Discord does that, but this is probably the only program that I have the issue with. I missed Emmanuel before. A big fan of System Crafters. Thank you for doing this. This is my first time joining the live chat. Thank you so much for being here. That's great. All right, did I have anything else inside of my notes for today? Yes, it is an awesome movie. And as you can see, I name my computers based on characters from that movie, so it shows how lame I am. You know, sometimes whenever you see a movie, whenever you're growing up, that has kind of an impact on you, it kind of sticks with you. So Hackers is definitely one of those movies. I remember watching Hackers late at night while I was messing with Slackware Linux and talking in Hacker IRC channels, probably in 1996 or 1997. So yeah. A little bit of backstory there. All right. Elephant says, can a tin can? I don't know what that means. All right. So I think that's probably enough for today. We're just over 2 hours, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. Juanito says, any consideration to take into account before migrating entirely to Geeks from Arch? Besides the non-free software, of course, just the lack of the same amount of software in general. I mean, you're not going to find all the same software that you would find on Arch because you have a lot of software available on Arch between the Arch repo itself and the AUR. However, that shouldn't stop you, because if you like using Emacs, there's a lot of Emacs packages in Geeks. So maybe if you move to Geeks, then it will give you an incentive to do more things in Emacs, and then your life will be like twice as good. So that's just my own opinion. Also, you know, it's good to consider contributing packages to the main Geeks repo if the programs are licensed appropriately, like if they have GPL or MIT or, you know, just some kind of free software license or open source license. I think it's a great thing to try to contribute more packages to Geeks, because the more people who are using it, the more people will have various programs that they want to use, and they'll maybe contribute those packages. So it's good for everybody. Let's see. Juanito says, I would consider installing both Flatpak and Nix as package managers under Geeks. It bolsters the selection of software used dramatically. Yes, I agree. I use all three of those basically for different things. I use Nix for installing, excuse me, newer versions of Node.js and the .NET tools. And I use Flatpak for installing things like Spotify and Discord. Yeah, programs like that. All right, now I'm really going to cut it off. So before I head out today, I just want to say thank you to all of my sponsors, if I can find my sponsors scene. These people have decided to sponsor the work that I'm doing, making these live streams and creating videos about GNU Emacs and GNU Geeks on this channel. And I'm very thankful to them for their support. It basically makes me feel really good knowing that people care enough about what I'm doing that they're willing to contribute in this way. So thank you so much for being a sponsor. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, definitely check out the links I have below in the description. I'm on both GitHub sponsors and Patreon. I also have a link to PayPal for one-time tips. And if nothing else, definitely like this video or like any video that you watch on the channel, and tell your friends about the videos, because the more people who learn about this, maybe the more people will switch to Emacs and GNU Geeks, and we'll have more people to talk to about all this fun stuff. So sharing the content is just as valid as becoming a sponsor. So thank you for anything that you're willing to do there. So I think next week, I'm definitely going to have a video about how to install the Geeks package manager. I might also have another video in the Emacs Essentials series to continue what we were talking about this week about essential movement commands. So we'll see if I'm able to get both of those prepared this weekend. I'm definitely going to do the Geeks video though. And then next Friday, another stream just like this. I don't know what we'll talk about yet, but if you have ideas for what we could talk about, definitely leave them in the comments or tell me on Discord and I'll consider that. And as usual, thank you so much for being here. Thank you everybody who was here in the chat today for contributing. I love all the comments and the interaction with the community and all the great ideas. So thanks so much for being here and taking part in my Friday morning experience. So anyway, thanks a lot for being here, everybody. And until next time, happy hacking. See ya.